Welcome, everybody, to the Aeon Bite interview, specifically our Finding Hermes initiative, where we focus on alternative modes of healing and therapy. And so I hope you're ready to walk through the doorways of perception with the God of the mind, and that Mercury will lead you to where you need to be, your higher mind, your true self, or the place where there is healing. And I'm very excited for this episode to be joined by Gemma. Gemma, how are you doing? And thank you very much for coming on the show.
Hello, Miguel. Thank you so much for having me. It's an absolute honor to be here. I've watched quite a few of your episodes and I just love your content, especially in these times. I think it's really important for people to be receiving this wisdom to help them remember the truth of who they really are. So thank you for your awesome work.
No, well, thank you very much. Yeah, we're all just trying to spread some light, and enough of us can open up our sparks. We will light up the sky. We will make the darkness less oppressive or less there. So yeah, we're all part of a grand design. And with us too, always glad to have him on Finding Hermes or Aeon Bite or anywhere. It's the Moondog Vance. Vance, how are you doing up there in the cosmic core of the galaxy or whatever?
Oh, fine. Swimming around swimmingly. And happy to be here with you and Jamita or Gemma. And I'm interested in hearing all about the shamanic wisdom and what anchoring the light is all about.
Indeed, very much. I found it, fascinating too. But let's start with you, Gemma, and your origin story. How your superpower from Clark Kent to Superman. How did you wake up?
That is such a great question and a very potentially long and detailed one, because it, for me, it really began as a child. Just having this awareness of the unseen world and not really having much guidance as to what to do with that. I was born into possibly one of the most intense energetic situations I think a kid could be, in terms of not that it was particularly traumatic, but just energetically heavy. My mum and dad owned hotels, pubs. And so by the time I was 2 days old, I was literally strapped to the hip of my mum behind the public bar with strippers and old drunks and all of the things, it was. And so I often joke about that, because I think, when we look at our background and our experiences, there's two ways of seeing things. They either happen to us or they happen for us. I think eventually we realize that it's happening actually through us. It's neither of the above. It's, it's happening through. But when I look back at that, I think there's two ways of us being able to work with what we've chosen to come in with, and that is we either become a victim to it. I have a family. My beautiful mum is awesome, but the rest of them think I'm absolutely stark bonkers crazy. So, I could be like, and I grew up in this family and I was so different and why did I choose them? Or I could be like, I grew up in this family and they were so different and that's why I chose them, because I think for us, as we've come through in this particular trajectory point, when we think of the path of a light worker or whatever you want to call it, somebody who's we're all here to be in service in some way, but that has consciously chosen, as you were sharing, to illuminate, to be the lighthouse for others. It's not a hierarchy. It's not a competition. It's simply that we have come in with an awareness and a choice of what we've come here to do. So I think when you wake up to that, you start to remember that you're the creator of this experience, and that, as the creator, you also get to change it. But you also see that, there's two sides of the coin. There's the victim and the creator, and we choose the things that we choose so that we can become who we are, so that then we can be the luminous leaders that can be there to help others shift. So in that way, like for me, my initiations throughout my life have been cataclysmic. Like I created 17 years of chaos for myself, very big processes, bankruptcies that were very public on the front page of newspapers, and really consistently big lessons. But the whole way through, I had a really strong awareness that this was refining. I was refining for something, because it was also the catalyst for my greater spiritual growth. That's how I got through those things. And people often say, how are you dealing with this stuff? You know, you seem to be, not to say, I'm not saying that in my humanness I didn't have moments of absolute breakdown, absolutely dark nights of the soul and all of the stuff, you know, but there was just always an awareness of there's something more, there's something bigger. This is a training. It's like a Jedi night school, I think, what we go through, you know. I sort of, when we talk about the shadow work, it's like you don't see Luke Skywalker going, oh no Darth Vader. He's like, I've got my lightsaber and I got the Force on my side. I got the wisdom of Yoda and I'm going into the dark and I'm going to illuminate it, you know. So that is kind of how I saw all of those things as an apprenticeship. And when I look back now, all of the things that I manifested in my life were all really training for what I do now. So the way that I found my way to the work that I really share these days and have done for the last 13 years, even though it began way, way before that, really I stepped fully onto my spiritual path. I used to find it funny when people would say, I had my awakening out. I'm like, what is that? Like, I didn't even think about that as being a thing. I just knew that things were opening up. I was seeing things, hearing things, experiencing things. I had nobody then to guide me through it. And I found my way through with finding good mentors, different modalities, but mostly my own inner practice. And then, of course, from that as well, you learn how to then assist others as they're moving through those processes as well. But my real shamanic path began actually probably in around 2010, I would say, is when it first started to come through. Actually 2007, because it's the first time I was in London and I picked up this beautiful substance called cacao, right? It's chocolate. But this was what they called a ceremonial cacao, or that's back in 2007. So that's a long time ago. It's like 18 years ago, before anyone knew about cacao ceremonies, before plant medicines really had started to make their big resurgence and all of the things. And then not long after that, a friend of mine, a yoga teacher, said to me, would you be able to do a cacao ceremony? And I'm like, what is a cacao ceremony? So I sat down with the spirit of this medicine. And what was interesting is I had found myself so connected to these sacred plants that I had basically started by default, because I never wanted it to be a business. It was actually a sharing, but it blossomed and bloomed into a business, working with Andean superfoods. So they're medicinal plants, not of the psychoactive kind, but, they're medicinal plants. And the cacao sort of started speaking to me and teaching me things, telling me things. And I started to understand my place in the holographic container of the sacred directions. I really became aware of what was arriving to me from the east, what was backing me from the west, what was coming in from the north, what was coming from the south, what was holding me from underneath, what was coming from above, and started to get this sense that I was bopping around in this holographic container of light where wisdom and information and support was arriving to me from all of these directions, and guardians and whoever it is that you connect to personally, right? So this is what I started to share in the ceremonies. I would speak to these guardians and call them in for people and guide people through processes to work with the energies of those directions and all the things. And then in 2011, I was seeing a lovely Colombian gentleman, and we were in Colombia. He really wanted to go to Peru to work with the medicine of ayahuasca. And I had no call to go to. I didn't even know about Peru, really, apart from Machu Picchu. So I knew I wanted to do that, because I think everybody does at some point in their life. It's just one of the things that everyone, if they can, it's worth experiencing. So that's why I said yes to going in Peru. And there I sat in an ayahuasca ceremony that was delicate. I'm just going to put it like that. It wasn't the most impeccable space I've ever sat in by a long stretch. it was not very held. It was very messy. And in this ceremony, I was watching the energies fly from person to person. I was watching the portals that were being opened up, you know, as is behind beautiful Moondog there. You know, these are the dimensions that you're traveling in. And there's, you know, when we're traveling in those dimensions, we need a guide. We need someone like a tether, so that when we're moving through those portals and those loops and those wormholes, we can come back into the body where we've chosen to be. And there was none of that. And I was just tumbling and spinning because I'm very open naturally. So, you know, he gave me a hero dose of medicine, like a cup like this big. You know, it's meant to, ayahuasca is served in small doses, right?
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, so it was really intense, but honestly, so that was 13 years ago now, and I'm still polishing the diamond of that experience. There was still so much gold that came through from that. And the biggest thing for me was, number one, what kind of facilitator I didn't want to be. And number two, it really set me on my path of the Andean cosmovision, the Andean shamanism from the high mountains. Because for about 6 months after that ceremony, I was pretty gone. I would say borderline psychosis. Like I was right on the edge of losing my mind, because what had opened was just way too fast, and there was no support for integration or anything like that. So, you know, I would be bilocating. I'd be sitting in my house 1 minute, and the next minute I'm a kilometre away in my neighbour's house, standing around their kitchen table, watching them have a conversation. And then I can't get back, and I can't get back in, you know, so all this was going on, and I was looking for someone to help me. I was seeing various energy workers, healers, and nothing was doing it until I came across a little elder called Don Basilio. He's about 4 foot nothing, like tiny little guy, very old, very beautiful, very humble. And I was working with him. He's from a place called Eros, which is right up in the high mountains, as high as you can get in the Andes, and it was never infiltrated by the conquistadors. So the traditions that we still work with today, the root is there. They say that they're the last descendants of the true Inca, because they never amalgamated with the Spanish. You know, they stayed very, very pure to their traditions. Actually, in Queros, the legend talks of these amazing masters called the Laika, which was like the enlightened ones. And when the conquistadors came 500 years ago or more now, they knew it was coming. It was no shock or surprise to them. It was prophesized. It had always been said that this Pachacutec, this cycle, was on its way, and it was necessary as a part of the White Brotherhood to lose their way, to really kind of blow out, and then to return to the original wisdom. But it was kind of a part of the awakening process and the healing cycle and the evolutionary cycle of Pachamama, of the earth, and of her children, that this had to happen. So they knew that they needed to keep the wisdom that they carried safe. And so when the conquistadors came, a lot of the Inca fled to different places and disappeared, by the way, like through holes, portals in mountains, into places like the mythical Paititi, which is not mythical at all. I've experienced it, and I know that it's a real place. At the very least, it resides as a portal in your heart to be able to access these other dimensions, you know. So the Laika, they took the wisdom up to where they knew the conquistadors would never come because it was too scary for them, which was right up into Queros, into these mountains. And they knew from their prophecies that there would be a sign of when they were to open and bring the wisdom down and share it. Like that was their directive that was passed down from generation to generation, is that you mustn't, you can't protect it once the sign comes. You've got to get it out there. And so what happened was, there's a temple in the center of Cusco. And Cusco, amazingly, is actually an altar to a mountain, an Apu, we call them. The Apus are the spirits of the mountains. And the Apu is the chief of the Cusco Valley in the southeast area, and it's called Apu Ausongati. And Cusco was built as an altar to Apu Sungati. So when you look at the old city of Cusco from the air, you see that it's in the shape of a puma. The head is a temple called Sacsayhuaman, which is the temple that sort of sits in the hills, in the mountains, in the hills of Cusco itself is 4,000 meters above sea level almost. But in the hills of Cusco is this ancient megalithic temple called Sacsayhuaman. And this was the head of the puma. The city was the body, and then the womb of the puma was this temple called the Kori Kancha. Kori means sun. It means the light. You know, it's like the photonic light that holds all of the information of the cosmos, of the multiverse, of everything. And so in this temple in the center of Cusco, they built the most important temple, the Kori Kancha, the temple of the sun, and it was a pyramid. And the pyramid, and you can still see it now, there's all these little divots in the rock where they pressed gold leaf, 24 karat gold leaf into the walls. So the whole pyramid was gold. And they say that only the masters, only the enlightened ones were able to look at it because it would be so blinding that you wouldn't be able to receive that amount of light without it frying you out. Mm-hmm. So what happened when the conquistadors came is they, of course, they tried to bury or bomb or take down a lot of these temples, and they stripped the gold off the Kori Kancha, and then they used it in the cathedrals that are now in the center. So you go into these cathedrals and it's like, wow, you know, the gold, it's phenomenal. And they sent a lot of it back to Spain. But what they did is they built on top of the Kori Kancha I think it was the Dominican monastery, like a monastery and a cathedral on top. So 500 or so years pass, and eventually the Laika have gone up into the mountains, and eventually the people forget that it's even there. And by 500 years later, a lot of people didn't even know that there was an Inca pyramid underneath this cathedral of the Kori Kancha. Now remember, the Laika are up there and they're waiting for the sign. So then I think it was around 1956, I might have the date a little bit wrong, but it's around that time, there was a massive earthquake. And as happens, because all of those pre-Inca buildings and Inca buildings are anti-seismic, but the Spanish, buildings that were built around them could not withstand the earthquake, it crumbled and out comes the pyramid of the Kori Kancha. And for the first time, people that had totally forgotten about it in their history that hadn't, because it had been so long, were able to feel and receive this temple of remembering. And actually in that temple, what was so famous as well about this temple is they said that this is where the sun disk was held that was gifted to the Inca from the Lemurian masters. Mm. So they believe that the Inca were the descendants of the Lemurian masters. That there was two. There was a divine couple that rose, which means they just came from Lake Titicaca with a mission to make sure that Lemurian wisdom, and the Atlantean as well, but really in that part of the world, the Lemurian wisdom wouldn't be forgotten. So the Lemurian masters, they say, gifted this solar disk. And, there's depictions of it as being this big thing of solid gold, which is what the conquistadors were looking for. They were looking for that solid, but of course it's not. It's alchemical. It's alchemical gold. But it was taken out of the Kori Kancha and moved before they were able to get there. So from that point onward, in the 1950s, then they started to come down with their traditions, with their medicine bundles, their messes, and they started to share it with as many people as they could. And so I know I just diverged, but that gives you an idea of the lineage that this beautiful elder carries. Yeah. And the humility. It was just, and we were working and he was giving me what's called karapai initiations, which are kind of like a rite of passage, or it's really it's really kind of an asking of permission, or it's an initiation, we could say, into different cosmic energies and earthly energies to harmonize, the body, the mind, the spirit, so that we can really thrive here and be in our best possible service here to Pachamama. And when he was giving me these things, I would just start to leave the building completely. My body would convulse, I'd be gone. And he was like, what is happening here? And I said to him, la, la, la. And he said, ayahuasca? I said, yes. He said, where? I told him. He slapped his head and went, oh, lie down. So I lay down, and he did this little ritual with his bell, with his mesa, with some flower water, some mapacho, which is the black tobacco, and a rattle. And it took him 20 minutes. And as he started to do his soul retrieval, that's actually what he was doing, I knew later, I saw myself running through galaxies like what we see behind Moondog, through portals, through galaxies, running. And then I'm on the earth, and then I'm running through fields, and I'm running. And then he blew the mapacho in the top of my head, and I went, and it was like a thud. I landed back in my body. And from that day forward, no drama, like job done. So from there, I was like, wow, this is what I want to do. I want to work with this level of grace, this level of humility, this level of strength and power in terms of how simply and effortlessly we can be by working with and communing deeply with, and that's the key to it all. It can't just be, I'm going to do this and do a ritual or do a thing and it works. It doesn't work like that. It's a deep, consistent communion with your guardians, with Pachamama, with the earth, with the beings of light, with, it has to be a relationship. And then the strength of that relationship means that when you're in those spaces, yes, there's some loose formulas that you can work with, but really it's a co-creation between you and the divine, so you're not actually doing anything. It's just like a flute being played by the divine, and you can work in these healing spaces. So that's what I do in my work. That's what got me there. And that's also what I share with others now in the trainings and apprenticeships I do is that, and it serves you in every single aspect of your life. It helps you to move through these huge times of transition that we're all in, knowing that you're not alone. Yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing, and such a wonderful story and bringing up the mythology. And of course, I relate with you. I'm part of the Santo Daime Church. It's Brazil Amazonian, and it's ayahuasca. It's esoteric Christianity. Those flights you've had them too. But I always tell people, you gotta have a good shaman. Like I said, you gotta have somebody there, and you gotta let the plant talk to you. And just because you finish the ritual, the plant ain't done with you. It's got a lot to cleanse and take you and drag you. It's just the beginning. So completely relate. And glad you found what you found. You were meant to find it. It was simple. It was all drawn out, and you had to be scourged and cleansed. The mystery religion, we go down into the underworld, and we are cleansed, and then we go up. And on a little side note, because this show deals with Hermeticism and Gnosticism, and I was like, well, does Gemma know about Gnosticism? And I was like, wait a second, you were in a reality TV show, so you know all about fake realities and people draining your soul. And I mean, you know it, right? I mean, you've been in the belly of this synthetic reality. You know false realities and how to get out of them.
Yeah, it's really, really interesting when I had the invitation to come on your show, because Gnosticism is something that really appeals to me. And years ago, I started to go down the rabbit hole with it. And when I was in Byron, and then I don't know what, I think I ended up moving over here to Bali on the 2020 thing. But yeah, absolutely, the awareness without knowing. And I look forward to learning much more. What I realize is that a lot of what I work with and do naturally and how I move through is the essence, I think, also of Gnosticism. And,
right.
I'm really, really careful. One of the biggest things for me, I think, as we're moving through these times that we're in, is being really careful of what you're aligning yourself to, because it's trickery. There's trickster energies that are around, right? And I remember during the pandemic I was in a meditation, and the sun, that sun disc, that golden disc appeared in front of me, and there was two guardians at either side, and they invited me to come through the sun because there was something that they wanted to show me. And so I followed them and I went through the sun and I ended up in something that kind of looked like a control room. And it was galactic, but the people that were in it sort of looked like humans, you know, like they were masquerading. And they had this big clear screen in front of them and they were working things around and formulating plans. And next we're going to do this and then we're going to, and, you know, la, la, la. And I was watching it like them having this conference. And I was like, oh my God, these guys they're ruling the show. That, you know, this is all orchestrated here. Like I'm watching it. And then the guardians that took me through the sun said, but there's more. Come again. And they zoomed out even further. And what they showed me, and I can't believe I'm actually saying this in public because I'm so careful about who I even say this to, because some people, you know, everyone has their idea and belief and opinion around. So all of it's valid and all of it's right. But this is just what I experienced in that moment. They showed me that whole period, the virus was originally created and coded for awakening, and that it had a purpose, but it had fallen into the wrong hands and it had been manipulated. But then they said to me, guess what? They think they've got control, but they don't, because everything arises from the light. Everything arises from the absolute purity and core of creation. And even though they think that they're in control, they're being played like puppets and they will fall. And I was just, and their message was before I returned is be vigilant about where you are putting your energy and your attention, because if you go after these and you know, it's like knowing what you know, and instead of damning the ones that do, rather finding the ways to get the people to focus on the truth. Because if you focus on the truth, otherwise you're only giving energy and volition, and you're giving power to these other beings. Because whether you're giving them your fear and your hate and your anger, or whether you're giving yourself over to them, it's the same thing. It's only energy. Energy is energy, right? And energy is neutral. Right. It's what we give to it that makes it good or bad. So that was my understanding.
Very Gnostic experience. Yeah. And I mean, at its heart, Gemma, it's not hard to understand Gnosticism, as scholars have found out at its core. Gnosticism is just shamanism. It just happened to happen in Egypt, and they're realizing the Gnostics simply took the ancient Egyptian mysteries, you know, go through the boat and go avoid the snake and all that, and they just couched it in Christian terms. So you have Jesus and Sophia, and you've got the Archons, but when you read their text, it's all altered states of mind rising from your, but what you and I experience, it's just the names have changed, and it's the same. The beings you met, they called them Archons, and above them are the Aeons and so forth. So it's an experiential religion. It's simple. So
I feel very inspired and excited to dive more deeply, because this is how everything has rolled for me in this way in my life. And this is where the adventure of life I get so excited by these unravelings, these rememberings. You know, not learning anything new. I think we're just remembering what is dormant in our DNA, right? That hasn't yet been
what
unlocked.
did Plato say? All learning is remembering. Simple.
And even going, for me, spending many years in the Andes and visiting multiple sacred sites multiple times. You know, I take groups there every year. The only year was that 2020 year that we didn't go. So, you know, I'm visiting sites that are off the tourist trail as well, you know, that are only known by the locals, and going to them repeatedly too. So every time you go, you realize that these sites are coded for different things, you know, like that they have been specifically coded by the masters for different openings, for different rememberings, for different portals, for different purposes, different reasons. But what happens is every time you go, you've changed. So the code is the same, but you are different, and so you relate to it in a different way. But what I love is that I never watched any of the, the Gaia stuff, the ancient aliens and all of that. And I would go into these sites and have this direct experience of what I would see and what I would hear, and the masters that would turn up and share things with me. And then people would say to me, "Oh, did you see on Ancient Aliens?" And I'm like, whoa, really? It's kind of like, because, in the Andes, we have this beautiful name, this term, it's called Yache. And Yache means divine intelligence. It's cosmic intelligence. It's like also on the earthly plane, it's like the wisdom that comes once you've embodied knowledge. But really that Yache, or Yuye, even more to the point, Yuye in Quechua means to remember. So it's like tapping into that universal field that, as my Maestro Puma would say, it doesn't belong to anybody. We can't box it and say it's this culture's or it's that or it's that. It's universal. And it's the remembering for me is how we access that field, so that we can then be discerning about the information that we pull down from it, that we draw from it, and in terms of the earth, the Yache is also in the Andean tradition. I love this, is seeded into the earth. So it's in the Akash, like it's in the cosmic field and the quantum field, but it's also in the earth. And that when we depart, when we leave this earth plane, we don't take anything with us. We leave it here as a record, as a seed. And then it's available for anyone to draw from. And that's where our discernment, as we were talking about before, like, which wolf are we feeding? That's where our discernment comes. Like, what am I actually going to receive here? Because it's all on offer. Everything's there, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Very true. Yeah. It's the same thing. And again, I had similar experience. Flew out and everything that was digital, and I saw behind the controls, and there was some differences, but we don't experience the same thing. We have different things to learn. But Vince, what do you think? I'd like to bring you in. Do you have any questions or remarks as you're out there in space?
Yeah. Well, I'm wondering, I'm kind of, sometimes I really wish the masters had a greater presence here on the earth. It sounds like these people that have descended from there, they have the stories about the masters in the times of old, but where are they now? Are they were they physical back then? Or did they come through us the same way that they say come through you or me or Miguel? I mean, what was the nature of those masters, and what's going on with them now?
I can share something on that from the perspective of the Andean cosmovision and from my direct experience more than anything. Vance, is so there's these miraculous, marvelous, majestic star elder beings that they call the Apus. Mm-hmm. So the Apus are the spirits of the mountains. And the creation stories say that the Apus were the original beings that walked the earth. They were a highly evolved race of great masters, but they were almost a little arrogant in their being because they didn't need anything. They didn't need contrast on the planet. They didn't need any assistance with anything. And that wasn't really the plan for what needed to happen here on the planet. And so their creation stories, and in Bolivia, actually, in Lake Titicaca, they have an even more, well, not more phenomenal, but slightly different variation about the Anunnaki, because they actually know that word. When you say Anunnaki to an Aymara, they say, oh, the dog people from Science, they say, right?
Yeah.
I'll tell you their version of it in a sec if you want to hear, but the Apus were petrified, enchanted into stone to be the guardians. So that the masters were always here for the new species of people to come, or beings to come through, which were the Homo sapien, which were the humans. And their job in that cosmovision is to guard the earth, and is to act like godfathers to the children. So this is why in the Andes there, and this is all through Peru and Bolivia, they're number one outside the creator, of course, is their ancestors. And then it's the Arles and Pachamama. So it's the spirit. And the word Pacha, interestingly, means time and space. That's what it means. So Pachamama isn't only Mother Earth as we think of Mother Earth. It is, but she's the cosmic mother. She's the mother of time and space. Pachatata, which is the father of time and space, is said to be manifest in the Arles. So they're not the creator, but they're kind of, I don't know if you call them creator gods, but they're masters. They're ascended masters. Yeah. And they take the form of the Arles. But in the Bolivian traditions, really interesting, because you see in the Bolivian folklore and the dances, which are beautiful, by the way, like to watch their traditional folklore and their dances. And if you go to I think it's called a Kenna, I might have that wrong, but it's like a traditional restaurant. And it's a bit creepy. It looks a bit like being in a ghost train, because there's these images of like these devils all over the walls. And I said to my friend who's a healer, medicine man, because the thing in Bolivia as well, they never had the big influx of Christianity in the same way that Peru did. So they're very open with their shamanic healing traditions. They don't kind of, in Peru, like everyone had to kind of go behind closed doors with their altar because it was demonized. But it didn't really happen in Bolivia. So they're a little more free with that. And I said to him, what is it with all these devils? I said, it feels really creepy. And he says, no, he said, that's the story of the Catholic Church. He said, so we had, we're talking tens, decades and beyond, maybe 200,000 years ago or more. He's saying that we had the humans, but they weren't humans. They were called chulpas. They were a little bit different. They were kind of more, they were a different strain of human that were a little more of the earth. And then we had a race of beings that we called the dog people, the Anunnaki. And they came because they heard that there were these very precious metals on the earth and that they would be able to mine them to use in their technologies. This is a Bolivian elder telling me this, who knows nothing about Gnosticism or New Age spirituality, nothing at all. He lives in a tiny little community on the side of the lake, and he said, so some of these beings were profound masters. They were of a highly evolved nature. They were like they were seen as kind of cosmic grandfathers and grandmothers, like star elder beings for the chulpas. He said, but some of them were really evil. He said, and they started to not only destroy the earth, but also treat the people very badly. So at that point, he said the chulpas started to fight, and they were murdering. So the chulpas, who were originally a very peaceful people, started to turn, and there was the first time ever on the planet there started to be like an unrest, like a civil war kind of thing. And so then there was an intervention from the angelic realms. And then the angelic realms came and they said, enough. And these were the ones that were kind of like the overseers of how everything was unfolding on the planet of Earth. And they came down and said, enough. You cannot, they really put their foot down. And what they did was they said, you, to the Anunnaki, to the Anunnaki, they said, you are incredible beings and you have so much to offer this earth, but you cannot continue in the way that you are. And so we are going to petrify you in stone, and you are going to become the Arles. And your job is to watch over and guard the earth for time immemorial and all of her children to come. And when they petrified them into stone, sometimes you could see their face, which you can. Like if you've ever been to the mountains in Peru or in Bolivia, you can see their faces in the stone, right? And then what had happened is the chulpas and the Anunnaki, because some of them were beautiful, beautiful beings, they mated and they created a new species, and that's us. So they also mated and merged with the angelic beings, us. So we have those three natures, within us, within our ancestry, within our DNA, within our blood and bones. And that is where we have this angelic nature. We have this, we're very connected to the earth. We're also cosmic beings, but we also have that side of us that can flip in to greed and jealousy. We also have that side of us that can, all of those aspects come from these original creator beings. And how they became to look like devils was because the humans that came after all of that remembered those stories, would always be honoring their ancestors. And so they started to make rituals and ceremonies and pray and ask the Arles, the star beings that were petrified in stone, for whatever it was that they needed. And when the conquistadors eventually made it up there and saw what was happening, they demonized them and said that they were praying to the devil. And so that is why at that point, which is around the time when all of those very colorful with the costumes and the traditional dances came about, they were depicting what happened. And the dancers depict the Spanish coming in and, overriding them and then demonizing their traditions and telling them that they were communing with the devil, and then the Arles become the devil, so it's phenomenal really when I see and hear all this stuff, because you hear these stories coming through in so many other cultures and variations, and there it is.
Yeah, I mean, it's startling because the more you study it, the more it's right there. Like you said, that mythology is so similar, not just to Anunnaki, the Gnostic Archons, the Titans in Greece, the Devas in Persia, the giants in Western Europe, even in Ireland, the Tuatha De Danann have similar stories and overthrowing. So it's, I don't know what to say, but it's true. I'm sorry, but it's so 100% true. And it's an important part of our awakening and our destiny. I'm sure you agree. We all have an important role to play. Our egos may not like it, but it's an important role to play, indeed. Anything else, Vance, or follow up?
Well, I wonder what's happening nowadays. I wonder how these Apu are viewing the Earth and the brinkmanship of possible World War III, and it seems that we've never been closer to annihilation. I hope they. What do you think they're doing now? Do you think there'll be an intervention again?
Yeah, well, this is what they're saying. In the Andean tradition, this time that we're in is called a Pachacutec, and the Tarapai Pacha means the time and space of change. So we're at the Hopi traditions, they all say this, don't they, where we're at the point of no return, and it's what we choose moving forward, of course, that's going to determine whether there is an intervention or not. And, my strong feeling, my knowing within myself, and from what I understand, is that Pachamama, Mother Earth, does not need saving. We are the ones that need to wake up and fast, because really she's only got to blink an eye open and we're gone.
Yeah.
And these, the Arpus are her guardians. They were working on behalf of her. So it's like Pachamama, she knows everything that is going on this planet. And through her Arpus, because the Arpus direct the elements, so they will, those chiefs will guide the elemental forces to where they need to go on the earth to bring harmony. And we see this over and over again, when we get way out of whack. I'm thinking of one particular story in my mind at the moment. There's often a natural disaster that creates some sort of cataclysm, and all of a sudden everybody puts down their differences and there's unity. And it's devastating, because souls that have put their hands up to be a part of that process have to leave. But all of a sudden it brings our focus back, keeps our eye on the prize to what this is all about. So she knows exactly what she's doing. And there are, I believe, galactic masters and guardians that will not let us, those same ones that I met with in that meditation visualization, they will not let us destroy this earth. They will destroy us before we destroy her. And, we've seen it happen with the fall of Atlantis. We've seen it happen, multiple times over the course of history. It's in everybody's, every sort of tradition that I've delved into or heard about. There is this creation story that's very similar no matter where you go, you know, about the meteorite and the cosmic dragon and, you know, the floods and all of the things. So, yeah, I think it's us that has to get with the cosmic program fast. Otherwise, you know, we'll just be wiped out and it'll start again.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Yeah.
We'll be in some story, some ancient story about these foolish monkeys who just couldn't get their shit together.
Totally. 30,000 years from now, they'll be like, yeah, we found this ancient civilization of these, you know, and can you imagine the things that they would find now? I don't know.
Yes. The world was falling apart and they were arguing on social media about how to fix something silly. Yeah.
It's like we got to this point before and they went, and then they got a little bit further and we had such high hopes for them, but then came Instagram.
It's like a selfie while the nuclear explosion is behind my back or something. Yes.
Hey, maybe there's something to that old superstition that some native peoples have, that the photographs capture your soul.
Yeah. Those mechanic beings have our soul. Well, let's talk about your role as a healer and a shaman. How do you help your clients or people? You talked about trips, but what are some of the other modalities that you offer, individuals or groups or whatever?
Yeah, so I have a lot of things that I share. They're all, you know, coming back to the same essence. I guess on one side, it's about offering trainings and apprenticeships in these wisdoms to help people find that, remember that within themselves, and how that helps them on their own path and their own journey, but also helps them to be in service to their families and communities. Because I think we're in a time where so many people want to be in service. You know, it's a natural desire for a lot of people to want to help in some way. And I think the most important thing with that is for us to realize that your purpose here isn't something you came to do. It's something that you came to be. Mm-hmm. And then the doing comes from that. I think it can be a bit of pressure that people put on themselves, that I have to be a healer, I have to be a, you know, this or that or whatever to make a difference. And it's just not true. So there's that side of things. And then on the other side of things, which is really the deep sort of, I guess, transformational work that I do, is I do work with sacred medicines. I work with ayahuasca, but I don't work with ayahuasca at this stage outside of the Andes. I work with it. We work with it in a very, very beautiful way in the mountains, very powerful, working with a lot of light. There is so much high frequency energy when we're working with the medicine. We work with it very succinctly and directly. The ceremonies don't even go for that long. There's a beginning, there's a middle, there's an end. And I love this about this way of working because it's so direct. It's so, it's impeccable but precise. That's the word that I'm looking for. So, you know, you go in, you get what you need, you come out. We also work in those ceremonies for global healing as well and transformation. And then when you're done, you're like clear. You know, it's like, boom, I've got what I needed to get and I know where I'm going. And that for me is how I'm interested in working with the medicines these days. With Pachamama, the medicine of Pachamama, I don't know if you know of this beautiful medicine. It's sometimes referred to as San Pedro. It's it's a medicine from the high mountains, originally from the temples of Chavin, which is about 9 hours north of Lima. And this medicine is like beautiful. This is like people often describe it as being their peak spiritual experience of their life, because it really touches you to source, like to that divinity within you, and that you are the divinity, you know. And when you start to see yourself, see your life, see your path, see your experiences through that lens, then the healing happens fast. You know, it happens effortlessly and naturally, because we realize that we're not our stories. They're important, but they're not who we are, you know. So we tap into the truth of who we really are and we change it from that perspective. The beautiful thing about Pachamama is it's a medicine of the light. It's a solar medicine. So we work with it during the day. I like to work with it in nature. You know, we say, or for me, I feel about these beautiful plant spirits is it's not a plant that has a spirit. It's an angelic master that chose a plant to incarnate into, where that wisdom is coded and seeded, those keys for remembering. And the beautiful thing about Wachuma, about San Pedro, and why it was called San Pedro, is because, again, going back to that time of the conquest, of when the conquistadors were there, and Pizarro, who was the head archbishop, he was like, why are your masters, these men of great wisdom, they seem to be drunk sometimes. And so they invited him and said, would you like to come and see? And he went, and they gave him a cup of what he thought was alcohol. So he drank down this medicine thinking that it was alcohol. And the only way that and this is chronicled, it's not just made up, it's actually there in the chronicles. The only way that he could describe his experience from his lens, because he was from the Catholic Church, it was like arriving at the gates of heaven and meeting St. Peter. Mm. That is, I think the reason that the name stuck is because it's actually a very good metaphor for this medicine. Because when we think about that old, that traditional story of meeting St. Peter, and, we're in Gnosticism here, but when we're talking about what we know of that, when we meet St. Peter, we're meant to review, right, our lives and see what we haven't forgiven, what are we still holding on to, what are our limitations, where has our ego been out of check, all of the things we review, right, before we get to step through back to our true nature, back to the divinity, return to the light, to our divine origin. And this is what the medicine does. I often refer to him, actually, where this came from, Sneaky San Pedro, is I had a man come and sit with me in Peru. He came on a group with me, and his name was, he was also a Robert Kennedy. So he was JFK's nephew. Mm. And Bobby Kennedy's son. Now, this guy was 6 years old, I think, when his uncle was shot, and not so long after his dad. And he was told, do not show any emotion. You have to stay neutral. Imagine telling a 6-year-old kid that, who's just been through a trauma beyond what anyone could ever imagine. And so as a result of that, of course, he ended up on a path of addiction. He was a full-blown heroin addict. He was an alcoholic. He went through all of the things, did all of the things you could possibly do, all of the work, and he ended up writing 3 New York Times bestsellers. He'd worked with ayahuasca, he'd worked with other medicines, but he'd never worked with Wachuma. So he comes and he drinks the medicine. And I was watching him in his process, and I was really leaving him to it, because he was having a fantastic he was having a conversation. He was talking with the medicine and asking the medicine to show him certain things that he needed to know. And he said when he came down, he had this look of absolute shock on his face, and he was like, I thought I'd got it all, but Sneaky San Pedro just lifted the rug and showed me what I missed. And this is the beauty of this medicine, because as we know, whenever we go through a trauma or something, big or small, in life that we haven't had the tools, the time or the wisdom to be able to process and transform, it gets stuck in the physical body, it gets stuck in the field, and that's eventually what creates dis-ease, and eventually will manifest into a physical illness if we don't
sure.
Reprogram it, right? So Wachuma will not let you get away with not feeling. You cannot bypass the body at all with Wachuma. He's like knocking on the door time and saying, hey, you see this pain in your shoulder? Well, guess what? I'm going to make it 1,000 times worse if you don't go into it right now and lean right into the sensation and see what it is. And when you learn to work with the medicine too in this way, it's very, very fast. But of course, the nature of people, is that they fight. That's what we do as humans. We're like, something's uncomfortable, and so we contract. And what I encourage people to do, and what the medicine does, is open, allow it, the intelligence, to move through you, to heal you, to reprogram those cells. You don't even need to know what's happening. So there can be a lot of jolting and twitching and all of the things as the medicine goes through, just like a zebra that runs from the tiger and gets away and then stops at the side of the waterhole, and it doesn't like sit there and go and tell all of its mates for the next 10 years about the chase from the tiger and re-traumatize its central nervous system. It gets rid of it in the moment. So this medicine is so somatic and so beautiful, and as all of the medicines, it works on layers. So if there's something in the physical, it'll tend to that first. It tends to the emotional body. And when you move through those layers, then you pop through into divinity. And then, wow, then you're at the place that we're always meant to be, which is in the beauty, in the divinity. And for me, I really believe that these medicines were never meant for healing. This is a new thing. It's the last 5,000-year cycle that the amount of heavy energy and the experiences that we've all been through the planet is too much. Like, we're overloaded. We can't transform that. We're masters of transforming energy. We're built for it. We're crystals.
Oh,
We
yeah.
have the same power just with the in-breath to receive the highest frequencies of light. Here comes a little puma. Hi.
Hello. That's Cleo.
Hi,
He's coming
Cleo.
to say hi. Come here, Cleo.
Well, this is interesting because this Sami energy, this high frequency energy, it's from the animals, from children, it's from nature, and it's available to us anytime to simply breathe in. And then as we breathe out, we breathe out blessings. That's a big part of the problem, I think, is that we have forgotten how. We've become unconscious. So on every breath in, you're either taking in one of two energies. You're either taking in hucha, heavy energy, or you're taking in light, Sami energy. You have to choose and be conscious about what you're taking in, how you're transforming it in your body, and also how you're giving it out, right? Because the what we call the aini, which is like the reciprocity, is happening moment to moment. So we can set up a high vibe aini for ourselves simply by becoming conscious what's happening with our breath. So with the medicine of Pachamama, this is the main one that I work with, and I work with that. Also I used to work very, like the word Pachamama actually translates loosely to the decapitator. It's off with your head, when we think about Alice in Wonderland and she goes down the rabbit hole,
Right.
and who does she see? The Queen of Hearts. And the Queen of Hearts is what? A decapitator. So, and everyone's like, ooh, the evil Queen of Hearts. It's like, no, she's taking off the ego mind to drop you back into the wisdom of your heart. And these Wachuma maestros in the ancient temples in the Andes, they're these monolithic beings that are holding these smiling faces, big grins at their heart. And of course, anthropologists misinterpreted that as saying that they were a decapitating nation, and they weren't. It's a metaphor for heart-mind coherence. It's a metaphor for integrating the ego mind into the wisdom of the heart. So this is why I love to work with the sacred medicines. And just to finish off on that, the way that I work with them these days, as I was saying, I used to do 2 ceremonies back to back and really push people to go in deep. But during COVID, I had a ceremony lined up. I had it booked, paid full, and I was doing a yoga practice, and I hear this, cancel it, the voice of the medicine. And I'm like, Maestro Wachuma, what? Like, there's people, I can't cancel it. It's 2 days away. And he said, cancel it now. He said, it is not good for you and it is not good for anybody. And I said, okay, I'm listening, because that's, that's what I preach to listen. So I'm listening. I'm going to practice what I preach. I'm listening. Had to ring every person and tell them. When I sat with him and said, why? He said to me, this is not a time for more expansion. He said, this is a time for integration and recalibration. He said, all the ceremonies done up until this point on the earth by the elders have been in preparation for this time. He said, the veils are thin, really thin. And the last thing we need is more people going into bigger processes where the guardians of the planet that have already got enough work to do have to then come and clean up stuff in your ceremony. Right? It was that direct. And I was like, okay, so when? And he said, we'll tell you. Oh, so here I am 1.5 years later. I'm like, now, no. Now, no. Oh my God, am I ever going to do this again? And he said, yes, but it's not a matter of if, it's how. It needs to be different. He said the nervous system of humanity is not the same as it was before. It's completely rewired. It's totally different. People are accessing psychic realms that spontaneously that they've never been able to touch before, and it doesn't take much. And there needs to be a delicate approach to things now. The old way of healing is done. Smashing yourself open to heal and to remember is done. We're working with the higher frequencies now. And that means that there needs to be a period of preparation. I mean, there always is, but when you tell someone to prepare for a ceremony, they don't really. You know, they've got work, they've got things going on. So there needs to be a period of actual preparation and intentions, like be ready. Prepare the nervous system, prepare the mind, prepare the heart to receive. Then deep dive with the medicine, and it will be different. Because people won't have to go through all of the hard stuff to get to where they go. They can get there effortlessly with less. So it's less on the body, it's less on the liver, it's less on the physical to also have to process. And then there needs to be a period of integration while people are there, so that when they step out into their world, they made it count. They made the experience count. They didn't just turn up to sing some kumbaya songs and be around. I say that as a joke, but, you know, like in the medicine circles, there's a lot of that going on where people just go week after week after week after week with, you know, more and more and more. And because it's community and they love to sing and they love to, and it's like, great, awesome. And then what? Like, how is it making a change in your life? If it's not changing the way you show up in the world and the resilience that you have within yourself and your capacity to shine and thrive, what's the point? So this was the directive for me, and the medicines are like the healing needs to happen quickly, and then we have to get on with the business of remembering, of you working with the medicines to build, to pull through the ancient wisdom and future, ancient and future wisdom, and use it in the way that the ancients did to build civilizations that are in harmony with the earth. That's really what it's there for. So that this is what the fast track, this is what they've called it. The fast track of the healing is to get to the point where we can actually come together in a circle, in a community, work with the medicine and focus. Like, what are we going to build together with this? And get on the same journey, in the same dimension, in the same realm, so that we're having the same vision, so we're experiencing a similar thing and bringing it through in that way. That's powerful. And I think we'll start. I'm already starting to see, like, I'm doing work with groups that are more focused like that, that are coming because they've done a lot of work with their personal process. And when you work with the medicine like that, you show up, and yes, you're going to move through stuff, as you would know, because you're accumulating it every day, but you do it quickly. You know, you work with the medicine, you clean it, and then you focus. Yeah.
Oh, wow. That's great. Thank you so much for that. That's wonderful. Well, we are at the end. Where I have it on the show notes, but where do you want to send people to find out more about you, Gemma?
People can find me on Instagram, Anchoring the Light, or my website, Anchoring the Light. I've got a course that I would love to gift to your listeners. It's a month-long course. It's normally $333 US, but I'd love to just gift it to people free, because I think it's really, from what the feedback that I've had, people say it's very helpful. It's called Be the Crystal. It's about building, it's like a resilience training for empaths. It's learning how to be in this world at this time and how to turn your sensitivity into a superpower and use it as your gift and your service to others. So people just need to go onto my Instagram and send me a DM with the word resilience, and then they will get that course for free. And there's heaps of free stuff on my website too that people can work with if they choose to.
Yeah, wonderful. Yeah, and go to her YouTube. I went there, and it was a wonderful rabbit hole. We talk about poos, but you just get on the camera and you give like a 55-minute talk on the apus. You know what I mean? We just scratched the surface on these amazing beings and all the other work you're doing, San Pedro and all that. So yeah, go to her YouTube channel too. It's educational, it's inspirational, it's just a good place to spend time in this meat sack world.
Thank you, Miguel. What a pleasure it's been here to be with you both. Thank you so much.
Pleasure's all ours. Yeah, Vance, thanks for being here too.
Oh, it's fascinating to hear it. I feel like I'm in another world.
Well, it's weird for me too. I mean, I'm a blonde-haired, blue-eyed lady from Australia, so sometimes I'm like, what is going on? Like, how come this stuff is like, well, because actually, last time I was in Peru, I asked that. I was in the portal of Pacha, and I said, what is going on here? Like, how come this stuff? And they said, I said, was I Andean I must have been in a past life. And they said, no, you were one of the original star elder beings that helped to see things.
Good.
As woo as that sounds, and I was like, oh, that makes sense. Because often for me, when I'm in the mountains and I'm walking down the mountains with my condor feathers out my backpack, and the kids are like they look at me like they've seen a ghost. But the way that I look is in their traditions. This is what they look like, the Pleiadians.
That makes sense.
They see, they're like, they think that you're a Nusta. They think that you're one of the goddesses from the Pleiades.
Right. Okay. Cool.
Well, welcome back. You know,
prices are higher than they were when you were up there.
Yeah.
Prices have gone up.
I don't know. It's getting so expensive on this planet. And some of the things just weren't on the brochure. I mean, I saw waterfalls, chocolate. I didn't see all this other stuff that's going on down here.
Wonderful. Well, Gemma, thank you very much for coming on the show, and good luck with everything. And we look forward to the next time we chat.
Thank you, Miguel. Thank you, Vance. Such a pleasure.
You're most welcome.
Thank you.
Emanuela. In my wanderings on the face of the earth, I came across a lovely and enchanting lady, which went by the name of Emanuela, she of the blue eyelids and daughter of the azure sunset. Emanuela was my dream among the nightmares of the world, and in her arms I felt like a god which loves in his temple of desire, and has no cares or concerns for the everyday world of petty and spiteful mankind. Emanuela was my goddess, and I worshipped her with nameless rites, which were old when the world was young. And in my love of her, I experienced total and glorious abandon. In my days with my beloved Emanuela, I kept a lookout for the scavengers and predators who stalked the lonely and deserted corridors of the night, landing on the shore of a hot tropical island, and ready to violate my sweet and precious Emanuela, young and nubile, and lust-driven before the winds of Pazuzu, god of the hot desert winds and of pestilence. In my time with my lady Emanuela, I became as a babe in a mother's arms, oblivious to thought and sensation. With Emanuela, I was in the seas of eternity, and I did not care where my ship landed. In her forbidden regions, I was not myself, and I did not know who I was or where I was at. Time had no meaning for me, because when I was with Emanuela, time was not, and I was not. In the days of our lovemaking, we looked over the shores of infinity and took our fill of love and lust, not caring whether all of creation lived or died. Many a time I died in her arms, only to be resurrected with a whisper and a kiss. Emanuela was my life and my love. When the world became her master, I became her slave. Many have entered her, and many have forgotten her. But I, Vasil Bakagias, have her transcriptions of love etched in my tormented soul, and I am forevermore a lord of her sweet and sensual passions, and a keeper of her secret and arcane mysteries. For it is written in the lost annals of love's forbidden and unknowable tome that Emanuela, daughter of the azure sunset and she of the blue eyelids, was my only true love in this world of lesser beings and senseless destinies. Hail the starry void of love!